Would you describe yourself as a conspiracy theorist?
If you can back that up with information, it's not a theory. Much of it is backed up by hard, factual information.
We're talking about two very specific proven cases,
yes.
right? Real, huge, elite, powerful people that were also active pedophiles, right?
Yes. The pedophile rings have gotten so big that the intelligence agencies began to leak all this info.
Whether we're talking about Facebook, whether we're talking about Google, whether we're talking about the government of any country, they know everything about us.
The American people are fed up with fake news, and the mainstream media they cannot trust.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Here you have federal law enforcement discussing removing the President of the United States by non-democratic means.
More confirmation than we ever thought we'd have that we are dealing with, yes, a deep state and what is the biggest abuse of power, corruption scandal in the history of this country.
I'm more like into the Rothschild family, the Illuminati. I'm into that.
Are you one of the people that think 9/11 could have been an inside job?
Absolutely. Are you one of those guys who just watches TV and just feels like they're just telling you the truth?
Do you believe that the Twin Towers were destroyed by forces of the American government or similar?
We have to remain open-minded to any kind of possibility. I think it's interesting the way these tragic events are used to enforce further controls on us.
They use force to make you do what the deciders have decided you must do.
You are a slave. You were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch.
We start putting these ideas and ideals on people. That's why we are in a simulation.
Maybe we're in a computer simulation. I can't rule that out.
Are we living in simulation?
I find it hard to argue against that possibility.
Physicists are providing some of the clearest evidence yet that the universe could be a big projection.
I've always wondered about whether we live in a simulated universe, and maybe we do.
They're creating a world, a simulated world, all around us. It's all simulated.
I never expected that the movie The Matrix might be an accurate representation of the place in which I live.
There is a multi-level conspiracy, a multi-dimensional conspiracy to enslave humanity in a fake reality.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
We've got to wake up, we've got to say no, we've got to get angry and get in the face of the new world order.
So many things are going to happen and are going to unfold and are unfolding that are going to show us that what religion and materialistic science has led us to believe is the nature of life, what we're doing here, and all the rest of it has been the most gigantic con trick in the history of the human race. We're about to wake up.
The disclosure of this subject is the most important announcement in the history of the human race.
Best thing that ever happened.
The best thing that ever happened in the history of humanity.
"1984 is, I believe, a quite terrifying masterpiece. So terrifying, in fact, I don't think I should like to read another like it. You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you've demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?"
I think that something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time.
The American people are living in a matrix. They don't understand the truth of how things are working in this country. The whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish.
Imagine a world under complete totalitarianism. It's a world of perpetual war, surveillance, and mind control, governed by a singular ideology. All independent thoughts and individualism apart from this reigning philosophy is considered to be a thought crime. At the helm of this state oppression is an ambiguous entity called Big Brother, and every day it requires a ritualistic cult worship to the state. But aside from this tyrannical adulation of Big Brother, there's also a calculated manipulation of language designed for one reason: mind control. People are conditioned through repetition and propaganda.
We just legalized propaganda being used by the government on our own people. We just made that legal. We are literally living in 1984. They're changing the answers to math now.
They've given up the power of original thought. They're under mind control, and I've been talking about mind control for decades.
It's so amazing.
It's working, though,
Yeah.
ain't it? It's working.
It sure is.
There are new technologies that provide the expertise to control people totally without their knowledge. Methods of advertising that manipulate us against our will.
As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will. Dr. Gottlieb wrote that he and his colleagues had been able to maintain contact with the leading edge of developments in the field of biological and chemical control of human behavior.
The significance of the research, he explained, is that although the cell phone power is low, electromagnetic radiation can nevertheless have an effect on mental behavior when transmitting at the proper frequency. What is this article, Jamie?
Scientific American. In Scientific American, it's titled Mind Control by Cell Phone.
So would you think that they're making this 5G
No, they declassified last year a 37-page CIA manual from the 1970s where they were putting up cell towers that look like trees, already testing it in neighborhoods. It's been in the newspaper that the cell towers are being used for mind control.
They use force to make you do what the deciders have decided you must do. They use force to make you do what the deciders have decided you must do.
Orwell refers to it as reality control. The majority of people living under the system are weak-minded, incapable of understanding anything more than the party's worldview. This willful ignorance is instrumental in the state's control over the peons.
It is almost beyond a science now. It is an exact mechanism of control. They can shape, mold, sculpture, form, and literally create any reality they want. They, you know who they are.
They do not want you to think too much. That is why our country and our world has become so proliferated with entertainments, mass media, game shows, television shows, and every kind of entertainment to keep the human mind entertained so that you don't get in the way of important people by doing too much thinking. You had better wake up and understand that there are people who are guiding your life and you don't even know it.
The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear.
everybody, this audience has been drawing comparisons, seeing the comparisons between what we are experiencing in our world and Orwell's book. And it's very, very scary what's going to be coming around the corner here. They're saying that they're already testing cameras in Holland, and they're ready to implement them in London for the Olympics in 2012, where they listen to the streets. And there's new facial recognition software that's out that's going to identify everybody in every photo that's posted on Facebook, on the internet.
We're forced to live in a real way naked before power. Whether we're talking about Facebook, whether we're talking about Google, whether we're talking about the government of any country, they know everything about us.
Then there's the perpetual war to fight an unseen enemy. In some cases, the government bombing itself to keep the masses living in fear. Orwell describes the concept, quote, "The object of waging a war is always to be in a better position in which to wage another war."
An atrocity like 9/11 was planned decades in advance. And the first indications and projections, ideations of this idea came out, for example, in a movie by Arnon Milchan in 1978 called The Medusa Touch with Richard Burton, in which the climactic scene is a 747 flying into the Pan Am building.
So many of the ideas and concepts in this book are applicable to the way our society has evolved today. In fact, since the explosive revelations about the NSA spying on American citizens, sales of 1984 have skyrocketed.
The social structure, the control of information, the perpetual state of war, the personification of the party, the telescreens, the snitch culture, all of this stuff is coming to a fruition. We don't have much time before we're living in the Orwellian nightmare.
The world is not random. The world is moving in the direction it is because it's been planned to do that. This is why Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, 1932, and George Orwell, Eric Blair as he was really called, with 1984, published in 1948, that's why they've been so incredibly accurate in predicting the way the world is going, because they weren't coming totally from their imagination. Because this plan for the global Orwellian state of total control, which is daily coming in, I mean, look around. It's not been planned for 5 years or 10 years. It's been planned for a long, 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 long time.
And they go to these billionaire functions. I don't just know this. I've talked to people, and I was in Wired magazine 20-something years ago. Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. Bill Joy, a billionaire, co-owner of Sun Microsystems. He goes to a billionaire meeting with 200 guys, and the consensus was, we're not going to let people play video games and party all day. We're going to set up a world government. We're going to slowly titrate the dose and poison the public, dumb them down, put electromagnetic radiation out with 5G that scrambles their DNA, lowers their IQ. We're going to cause mass mental illness and a controlled societal collapse that'll then be organized and controlled in the mop-up crew by robots, controlled by the globalist programmers who believe with the off-world entities they're in communication with, that they're going to be given the operation to upload and be in that larger kind of Borg cube system if they sell the country out. You're not given the real technology. You're not given the real life extension. You're given the crap, Joe. And the Earth is seen as like an egg yolk to give the propulsion power for this new thing that's going to be born. And whether you believe that or not, just like when
the new thing meaning artificial intelligence?
Beyond that. It's beyond a fusion of artificial intelligence and a whole synthesis of new life forms.
The fear of a global dystopia, a nightmarish future where the masses have been reduced to brainwashed zombies who live under the fist of a totalitarian world government, is becoming an ever-increasing concern in our time. Many have been insisting that our world and the cozy, independent lives we think we live are in fact controlled at every turn by a small group of powerful elites who hide in the shadows and conspire to make us more complacent and docile. Knowledge of these shadowy elite and their dark plans of global domination have been known for some time, having been exposed decades ago in the dystopian novels Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and 1984 by George Orwell. both of which seem to have accurately predicted a distant future of unprecedented tyranny and mass brainwashing. Indeed, it seems that every day, Orwell's and Huxley's visions are becoming more factual than fiction. For example, the release of previously classified information via WikiLeaks has revealed hitherto unimaginable levels of government control and corruption, and the disturbing rise of a seemingly omniscient surveillance state reflective of Big Brother in Orwell's 1984 has also been a serious cause for alarm. Orwell's concepts in particular have proven to possess an eerily predictive quality, such as doublethink, that is, the ability to hold two contradictory opinions simultaneously. This seemingly fictional concept has manifested in our own time in a very real way among radical protest groups that have emerged across the West in recent years. For example, Antifa, or anti-fascists, who use violence to fight for peace. Or the Black Lives Matter movement, members of which claim that blacks are unfairly targeted by a racist police force and yet still show unanimous support for the Democrat Party, whose political platform seeks to have only the police have weapons. Or widespread feminist support of Islam despite the religion's avowed opposition to women's rights. These and other radicalized groups are connected with a loose confederation of activists known as social justice warriors, who often fight racism and sexism by demonizing white men, yet another clear example of doublethink.
Judging by what she wrote on Twitter, Sarah Jeong is an angry bigot, and not in a subtle way. Here are some examples of her tweets. Quote, "Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old white men." The New York Times decided to double down on Sarah Jeong's behalf. Here's part of the statement the paper sent out about her. Quote, "Jeong's journalism and the fact she is a young Asian woman have made her a subject of frequent online harassment. For a period of time, she responded to that harassment by imitating the rhetoric of her harassers. In other words, it's not her fault. White racism caused Sarah Jeong's racism against white people. She's the victim here."
You're a white male! You're a white man!
Nobody has to save you because you're a white man who gets to do whatever he wants to in this space, right?
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him. Yeah, that's nice for
we have these things called scholarships.
They think of themselves as arch enemies of racism. They get tattoos on their arm telling you that, and yet they're its chief purveyors. Deep, deep irony.
When you see the social justice warriors saying you're an effing white male, you're not allowed to have an opinion, and they're effing white males saying it to you, there's no irony to them.
You're seeing this creation of the snowflake mentality where people call themselves anti-fascists while acting like Nazis in terms of destroying freedom of speech and everything. They are in so many ways the stormtroopers of the Orwellian world.
I've been physically attacked by people associated with the far left and Antifa in the past. And this is, like I said, just one of the more recent instances where they've confronted me for seemingly no reason. I mean, this guy doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm doing. I was just walking by in Boston with a camera, and immediately I got bombarded by a group of people with masks on just yelling at me.
There's a new group around in Australia and America calling itself Antifa, anti-fascist. They attacked another conservative photojournalist, Andy Note, leaving him bleeding and bruised. Police did nothing during this astonishing, violent, animalistic pack attack. Daisy, it seems to me Antifa are not anti-fascists at all. They are the real fascists.
Tell us what happened.
On Saturday, documenting this protest that was organized by Antifa and its allies, while hearing people chant, "No hate, no fear," I'm suddenly bashed on the back of my head. A mob of people, all dressed in black and wearing masks, started beating me with their fists, and some of them used objects to hit me. I put my arms up to try to shield my face, as well as to signal to them that I was surrendering and that I wasn't there to fight. But that really signaled to them to be more aggressive. So then they started dumping what I believe were milkshakes and eggs, throwing it at my face, which blinded me so I couldn't see, and I was kicked some more, punched some more. After arriving in the emergency room, I had a CT scan which confirmed that I was diagnosed with a brain hemorrhage.
When you get people together and you let them wear masks and you tell them that they're fighting against some evil, and then they feel justified in hitting a person like you, it is really sickening. When you're trying to enforce your own ideology on other people and you have no tolerance for anybody with a differing opinion, particularly journalists, that is fascism. It's so ironic to call yourself an anti-fascist when you're literally enforcing your own particular ideology to the point of violence, and you're wearing masks and you're running around hitting people and pretending that you're being inundated with Nazis and white supremacists and that this is all necessary. Like that old man that was just driving and they're directing traffic and forcing him to obey them. And then when he doesn't want to, they chase after him and assault him. It's twisted. And it's twisted the way it's being depicted in the media. It's very strange how it's being dismissed.
This shockingly contradictory mindset is found not only among rank-and-file protesters, but has even been exhibited by influential members of the media. In the following clip, CNN anchor Don Lemon expresses two radically opposed views in the very same sentence, a perfect example of doublethink.
I keep trying to point out to people not to demonize any one group or any one ethnicity, and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men. Not to demonize any one group or any one ethnicity, and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men. So what do we do about that?
It's a frightening development, but reality cannot be ignored. Thousands of brainwashed radicals and protesters across the West have exhibited the very characteristics of the enslaved masses in Orwell's novel. And more than ever before, education and the mainstream media mirror the state-controlled propaganda of 1984's Ministry of Truth, which only allows news and history in line with Big Brother's agenda. Through these propaganda outlets, a gradual and strategic brainwashing campaign has been carried out, giving rise to yet another Orwellian concept, the thought police. That is, groups of people who seek to suppress ideas and speech deemed politically incorrect, as more and more people are being attacked and even arrested for speaking things arbitrarily deemed as hate speech. The rise of political correctness and the resultant fear of saying something potentially offensive is the direct result of totalitarian brainwashing propaganda.
Last Thursday, Middlebury College experienced a scene that's becoming increasingly familiar. Dr. Charles Murray, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, was invited to speak. A massive protest greeted him. The intent was not to simply express peaceful dissent, but to shut down his speech. Dr. Murray and the Middlebury professor who interviewed him ran into a mob of protesters, several of whom physically assaulted Dr. Murray's interviewer and forced her to the hospital. The incident and others like it bring into sharp relief a growing tendency on American campuses, an intolerance for freedom of speech and a challenge to intellectual diversity. This incident with Dr. Murray at Middlebury was not the first time this has happened. We're seeing this all over the place. This didn't exist when you and I were going to college. No. What has happened?
Future generations will look back.
So hate speech is inextricably tied to political correctness or cultural Marxism, and that creates intellectual conformity or intellectual authoritarianism. And that's where you start to see things like safe spaces or trigger warnings or speakers banned from campus or people with unpopular opinions banned from social media. And I know that can seem trivial, but today's social media outrage can be tomorrow's laws. And as we've seen, hate speech laws and political correctness destroys lives, as we see all across Europe. For example, these British men arrested for offensive anti-Islam comments. These people arrested for saying racist things on a tram. Or our very own friend Tommy Robinson, who is charged with inciting racial hatred with a flag that says, F*** ISIS. Shouldn't other Muslims want to F*** ISIS? Or this singer arrested for racism after doing a cover of Kung Fu Fighting at the wrong time because a Chinese passerby happened to hear him outside the bar. So what's the end game here with hate speech laws? Well, a couple of things. On that front, we have legal censorship from the government. And that's a problem, but it's not nearly as pervasive as the one we face daily from cultural Marxism in the intimidation, the cultural authoritarianism of intimidating people into self-censorship. Sure, the government may not step in and tell you that you can't say something, but for fear of losing your job, for fear of being ostracized in society, for fear of being exiled as a racist, as a transphobe, or labeled with one of these life-altering names, people are intimidated into silence. At that point, the government's not required, which is the brilliant sleight of hand that you see from the modern left, as seen here by the ACLU, where they will defend legally one's right to freedom of speech, but they will hesitate at nothing to destroy someone's life culturally for saying the wrong thing. And this is why political correctness, or cultural Marxism, and they are synonymous, lends itself so fashionably to easy labels. Transphobic, homophobic, xenophobic, racist, bigoted, Uncle Tom, white privilege, mansplaining, all of these are slapped on people with politically incorrect opinions in an attempt to silence you.
Political correctness is quite simply getting the target population to silence itself. That's what it is.
I think free thought is almost dead in this country, that people are bullied into feeling a certain way, and if you don't believe what somebody else does, they will bully you and boycott you and try to kill you.
As the evidence shows, an alarmingly large number of citizens appear to have fallen victim to government-sponsored mind control and brainwashing techniques, which have, over time, created a generation completely incapable of independent thought or critical thinking. Consequently, thousands have risen up in support for the abolition of all national borders, a goal that has been explicitly recognized by elites as being an integral part of their plan for a one-world government. In other words, people are actively protesting for their own enslavement.
I mean, how do you persuade the struggling economies in Eastern Europe to accept more refugees?
Actually, what we see now in Europe is that the average voter is persuading their governments. We have seen a huge wave of solidarity by citizens for refugees. The same solidarity I would really like to see by the heads of states and governments. They are failing, but they are pressured by their voters, by their citizens to go ahead. I think this is really positive that we have so many people who say a refugee is a person like you and me, and I'm not gonna have those people sleep in the street or starve.
No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. No fear, no wall. 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 Sanctuary for all. No fear, no wall. Sanctuary for all. No fear. No borders, no nations. What do you want? What do you want? Open border. What do you want? Open border. What do you want? Right.
Do you believe that the United States needs to have a border?
I do not think that there should be a border in that sense.
So you're okay with illegal aliens coming into the border, right?
Yeah, I don't...
Illegally crossing the border?
I think borders are ridiculous.
Okay.
No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. No fear. Refugees are welcome here. No hate, no fear.
Member states are not willing to be living together in solidarity, even though they all signed up to it when they joined the European Union. And a lot of them are not willing to help refugees. That is a problem, because the right to ask for asylum is one of the most fundamental rights we have in the European Union. The idea of traveling freely, of overcoming border, that's at the heart of the European Union.
Does more immigration help ordinary Americans? Does it improve the country? Or does it just enrich an elite class, the policymaking class, at the expense of everyone else?
Open borders are a disaster. Open borders happened in Europe in two ways. First of all, open borders is the official policy of the EU for the countries within the EU. That is literally what they mean by free movement of people. You can go between the countries wherever you want. But what Angela Merkel did a couple of years ago was also open the external border and say to the refugees fleeing not just violence and war in the Middle East, but also, frankly, poverty in the Middle East and in Africa, come to Europe, come to Germany, we'll take care of you. And then what happens, once you go in through the external border of the EU, you can move around wherever you want within the EU itself. And so you saw exactly the same thing happen as you're seeing now here, where you had people coming into Europe through one point of entry and then moving through those countries. It's been a disaster. I've got family members in Germany at the time. They were welcoming those people. They were proud of Angela Merkel for saying, come to Germany. They thought it was a great idea. They were going to prepare food and gifts and making these refugees feel comfortable. Now, 2 years on, I've just spoken to them. They think the whole thing's a disaster. The migrants are not integrating. They're not learning German. They can't get jobs. It's a huge burden on the economy and the society. The whole thing's been a disaster, and we've got to avoid it here by being tough.
But it is a direct parallel with what might happen here with these caravans and this, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people coming in. There is, you see, a direct parallel.
It's exactly the same.
People were taught how to think, we're taught how to feel. We don't know how to think for ourselves. We don't know how to feel for ourselves. People say feel free, but they don't really want us to feel free. It's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because we're choosing to be enslaved. You're choosing to enslave people's minds. You're choosing to not let the truth be free.
You are demanding the building of your own prison.
All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care.
This thing snuck up on us. And it's here now. And it wants to kill every man, woman, and child of us. And is not going to make deals. And is not going to play games.
Nothing in this world works the way you think it does. Nothing. Governments do not operate the way you think they do. Banks do not do what you think they do. The police department is not here for what you think it is. Nothing in your world works the way you think it does. There's a far higher, bigger picture going on the earth for at least 7,000 years of human history that we modern day people really just don't relate to. All we know is what we live with today, but never suspecting that the institutions of power, banking, education, the military-industrial complex of the world has taken hundreds of years to develop. On the opposite side with the pyramid, and very few people have ever wondered, why is there a pyramid on an American dollar bill? Well, beneath the pyramid, you will see on the pyramid, it says 1776 in Roman numerals. And the words beneath it, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is in Latin, New Order of the World. So you've heard the Bushes talking about a new world order. Well, that's exactly what's happening. The whole world is being taken over into what is called a new world order, right here on the dollar bill.
All of these factors, from government surveillance and mind control to political correctness and open borders, are integral to the globalist agenda commonly known by its critics as the New World Order, and never has its existence been more evident or acknowledged than it is today. Since the release of the 1999 film The Matrix, the New World Order has also come to be alternatively referred to as The Matrix, as many perceive the film to be an accurate metaphor for the system of political, social, and psychological control that various aspects of society have over the masses, from political elections to television and movies and the educational system. Those ultimately behind the New World Order, or the Matrix, are believed to be part of a global satanic cult known as the Illuminati, who, through ritualistic blood sacrifice, including that of children, communicate with demonic entities who, in return for sacrifice, grant Illuminati leaders power over the visible world. For decades, this global satanic cult and its New World Order agenda has been recognized by the Christian prophecy community as evidence of Satan's plan to prepare the world for the Antichrist. However, the increasing exposure of the New World Order and its satanic architects in our time makes it seem as though Satan's plans are rapidly unraveling. Even more puzzling is that the New World Order is being exposed primarily by people who, from a truly biblical perspective, are as satanically indoctrinated as those behind the New World Order. It would appear then that Satan's house is divided. How could the great deceiver and leader of the fallen angels allow his own kingdom to be exposed by his very own? The simple answer is that he wouldn't. In the 12th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, Christ confirms that Satan is not foolish enough to allow his own kingdom to fall through internal division. Satan himself is exposing the New World Order, a phenomenon which I call the Matrix disclosure, as part of a conspiracy far greater than anything ever conceived by the Illuminati.
You have been grievously deceived.
Had a Kundalini awakening that just blasted her open, and all of a sudden these little men in brown robes started appearing to her in her kitchen, her bedroom, her living room, and started showing her glimpses of the future.
And they never called it the cabal. They always called it the families. That was their term, 12 or 13 families.